Good evening and welcome to Sunset News on this beautiful Wednesday evening. As usual, we bring you news, community stories, economics, weather, sports, and so much more. I am Glenora Shipura. Starting us off in the news tonight, 16 employees in the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Land Reforms Division of Lands are demanding an estimated 16 million dollars in unpaid subsistence and travel allowances, an average of 1 million dollars per employee, claiming they have spent years working outside their designated duty station without receiving the compensation they are entitled to. The employees argue that although their employment contracts designate Nkerenkuru as their official duty station, they have been stationed at the ministry's offices in Rundu since the start of their employment and have never received the allowances they believe they are legally entitled to. Now, according to one of the affected employees, the amount owed varies depending on an individual's state of employment, with the combined claim for all 16 workers estimated at around 16 million Namibian dollars. Now, the employees maintain that the ministry never fully amended their contracts or issued written notification changing their duty station from Nkerenkuru to Rundu. As a result, they argue that they remain contractually based in Nkerenkuru and therefore qualify for daily S&T allowances for the entire period they have worked in Rundu. The workers say they first raised the matter with the ministry in 2024 but have yet to receive a formal response. Now, frustrated by the delay, they sought legal advice and instructed a lawyer to write to the ministry's executive director on their behalf. They insist that despite Nkerenkuru being listed in their contracts, they have never worked there. Another employee said the prolonged uncertainty has had both financial and personal consequences, particularly as workers now face a possible relocation to Nkerenkuru. Now, according to the employees, the current S&T rate implemented in April stands at 1,318 Namibian dollars per day, up from 709 Namibian dollars previously. Now, the workers further accused the ministry of disregarding provisions contained in existing legislation. In response, the ministry's acting executive director, Alfred Sikopo, confirmed to Network Media Hub that he was aware of the employees' concerns, but said the matter remains under review. He noted that the complaint predates his appointment as acting executive director on the 1st of April. While Sikopo confirmed visiting the Rundu office about 2 weeks ago, he stopped short of describing the engagement as a formal meeting on the matter. Asked whether the affected employees were contractually required to be based in Nkerenkuru, Sikopo declined to comment, saying the ministry first needed to consult internally. Moving on to our next story, more than 25,000 malaria cases were recorded in the Kavango West region over the past year, exposing the persistent threat the disease continues to pose despite a major expansion in prevention efforts. The figures revealed by Kavango West Governor Verna Sinibo during her State of the Region address last Friday underscore the scale of the public health challenge facing the region, where malaria remains one of the leading causes of illness. Malaria continues to pose a serious public health concern in our region, Sinibo said. She said the more than 25,000 cases reported during the review period serve as a stark reminder that the fight against the disease is far from over, particularly in high-risk communities where transmission remains widespread. The governor's remarks come despite significant progress in malaria prevention, with indoor residual spraying coverage increased from 47% to 77% over the past year. This represents significant progress in malaria prevention and demonstrates what can be achieved through coordinated action, she said. Sinibo attributed the improved coverage to stronger collaboration between government, healthcare workers, development partners, and local communities. However, the persistently high number of infections suggests that malaria transmissions remain deeply entrenched in parts of the region, highlighting the need for sustained interventions and stronger community-level prevention efforts. She said government will continue to intensify awareness campaigns and strengthen measures aimed at reducing infections. Now, alongside efforts to combat malaria, Sinibo highlighted ongoing investments in healthcare infrastructure across the region. The construction of the Rupara maternity ward is nearing completion following a $1 million donation from the Development Bank of Namibia, while renovations at Nankudu District Hospital are continuing. Preparatory work has also begun on the long-awaited Nkerankuru District Hospital, a project that remained idle for more than a decade and is expected to improve access to specialized healthcare services while easing pressure on existing facilities once completed. Now, the region has also conducted multiple rounds of polio vaccination campaigns as part of broader efforts to strengthen protection against vaccine-preventable diseases. Sindibo said government remains committed to expanding healthcare infrastructure, strengthening disease prevention programs, and improving access to quality healthcare services. The health of our people remains one of our most important investments, she said. Auditors could soon be required to report fraud, theft, and other serious financial misconduct under sweeping reforms introduced by Finance Minister Erica Shafuda as the government moves to overhaul a 74-year-old law governing Namibia's accounting and auditing professions. Shafuda introduced the Accountants and Auditors Regulatory Authority Bill, which seeks to replace the Public Accounts and Auditors Act of 1951 and create a modern regulatory framework aimed at improving corporate accountability, strengthening investor confidence, and protecting the public interest. The existing law was inherited from South Africa before independence and has undergone only limited changes over the past 7 decades. At the center of the proposed legislation is a requirement for auditors to identify and report what the bill terms reportable irregularities. This include unlawful acts or omissions by management that cause or are likely to cause material financial loss, as well as fraud, theft, dishonest conduct, and serious breaches of fiduciary duty. However, the bill extends far beyond whistleblowing obligations and represents one of the most significant reforms of Namibia's accounting and auditing professions since independence. One of the biggest changes is the expansion of regulation to cover a broad range of accounting services. The bill defines accounting services to include bookkeeping, payroll administration, tax preparation, and advisory services, forensic accounting, valuation services, financial reporting, financial consulting, and risk management services. Many practitioners who may not currently consider themselves subject to a statutory regulator could be required to register under the new framework. The legislation would also replace the Public Accountants and Auditors Board with a new Accountants and Auditors Regulatory Authority. The new body would be responsible for regulating accountants, auditors, and accounting technicians, accrediting professional bodies, monitoring compliance, conducting inspections and investigations, and enforcing disciplinary measures. Under the proposed law, auditors, accountants, accounting technicians, and firms would be required to register and obtain certificates to practice before offering services to the public. Registered practitioners would also be required to belong to accredited professional bodies and maintain their professional standing. The authority would be empowered to conduct inspections and practice reviews, investigate allegations of unprofessional conduct, request information and documents from practitioners, and impose sanctions where misconduct is established. In our next story, a group of 151 former Nova NEM Lüderitz temporary employees marched to the company's premises on Wednesday and handed over a petition with six demands addressed to the Minister of Agriculture, Water, Fisheries and Land Reform, Inge Dhamwani, to Nova NEM Human Resource Manager Manu Ndamukomba. A copy of the petition was also received by Councillor Besley Makwaula on behalf of the Kara's Governor, David Gertze. The workers called on the government to save the jobs of the 151 temporary employees who lost their jobs in May 2026 by allocating a sufficient quota to Nova NEM. They argued that an additional quota would help prevent similar job losses in the future. The petition also calls for the introduction of a minimum wage in the fishing sector and for fishing companies to create direct permanent employment rather than relying on temporary workers. Based on the revenue generated by the sector, we are asking for the introduction of a minimum wage to improve our living conditions. We are the ones who go to sea and face harsh conditions and danger, yet we continue to struggle economically. We do not receive a basic salary. Long-term temporary employment resembles the old contract labor system. We need to be rewarded fairly for the value we create, the group said. The workers said they were looking to the minister and the governor for urgent intervention to prevent further unemployment among young people. They also said they were aware of government-reserved quota that could be allocated to Nova NEM to support job creation. According to the group, company management informed them in May that Nova NEM had not received sufficient quota to provide employment for them throughout the year. 151 temporary workers, many of them breadwinners, were laid off in May 2026 and are now without an income. The workers also referred to recent remarks by Fisheries Minister Inge Dhamwani, who said the sector contributes more than 14 billion dollars in revenue and accounts for more than 2% of state revenue. That concludes the top stories. On the other side of the break, we get into our story of the day.
Namibia is a land of movement, with waves that never stop reaching forward. Here, adventure is not something we search for. It is something we are born into. In every corner of this country, creativity rises, from artists, from athletes, from dreamers. And when the world comes to explore Namibia, they discover something extraordinary. Because when sport moves people, creativity moves ideas, and tourism moves the world toward us. Something powerful happens. A platform where movement meets imagination, where industries connect, where opportunity grows, where Namibia's next chapter begins. Welcome to the Creative Sport Tourism Expo. Exhibit, partner, experience. Creative Sport Tourism.
In our story of the day, construction of water supply and sewer reticulation networks in Afidi Extension 3 is progressing well, with the Ongwediva Town Council expressing satisfaction with the pace of work and the quality of work being carried out on site. The project, which forms part of the council's efforts to improve service delivery and support sustainable urban development, is expected to enhance access to reliable water and sanitation services for residents once completed. Ongwediva Town Council spokesperson Otili Shingenge said the project represents a critical investment in the town's future development. The project is being undertaken by Ashikuti Construction and Plumbing CC and Upmark Investment CC, which were contracted by the council to develop and install the critical water infrastructure. According to Shingenge, the contractors are making satisfactory progress and are working to ensure that all project activities are completed within the approved timeframe. As part of its oversight and quality assurance responsibilities, the council's technical team conducted a site inspection on Tuesday to assess progress on the ground and verify compliance with approved specifications and project requirements. Shingenge said the inspection formed part of the council's efforts to ensure accountability and maintain high standards throughout the construction process. Project site inspections are an important aspect of council's oversight responsibilities. They allow us to assess progress, verify the quality of workmanship, and identify any potential challenges early enough to ensure that projects are delivered on time and according to specification, she explained. She added that regular inspections help safeguard public investment and ensure that residents ultimately benefit from reliable and sustainable infrastructure. That concludes the story of the day. Up next is the economic news. Bank of Namibia Governor Epson Wangutha has added his voice to growing discussions over a potential Namibian stake in De Beers, saying it made sense for a diamond-producing nation to own a share in the companies that extract its resources, even as negotiations over the global diamond giant's future remain unresolved. Speaking at the central bank's monetary policy briefing this week, Wangutha said a dedicated team was still assessing the opportunity and that authorities had yet to receive a full update on the state of talks. I think that negotiation is still on. We're still to get a full update on how far that negotiation is, he said in response to questions from Namibian Sun. Of course, as a country that is producing diamonds, it makes sense to have a stake in the products that you are producing, Wangutha cautioned, however, that several factors still needed to be carefully weighed before any decision could be taken, including the size of a stake that would be feasible to acquire and the timing of any move. We have not yet received the full information. I think there is a dedicated team that is really looking into that, and then we will be possibly getting that update later, he said. Not everyone is convinced. Academic Omo Kakuyaha Matundu rather dismissed the prospect outright, arguing that the rise of synthetic diamonds had fundamentally weakened the case for any equity purchase. You don't buy a dead horse, he said. Why don't they leave it in the hands of Anglo-American as is and get taxes and royalties? The government should stay clear of this and reconsider buying a stake. Independent economist Robin Sherburne described any acquisition as a long-term bet on an uncertain market. It is a big bet on the future of natural diamonds, he said, adding that the success of such an investment could only be judged over time. This can only be a long-term investment. Sherburne also raised a series of unanswered governance and financial questions. How would government shareholders ensure marketing spend remained sufficient to sustain demand? How would decisions be made in a company shared between Botswana, Angola, and Namibia, particularly difficult ones? And given the government's track record in running commercial enterprises, would decisions be made on commercial or political grounds? He questioned. Now, moving on to our next story. The Bank of Namibia has raised its benchmark repo rate by 25 basis points to 6.75%, its first rate increase in 2026, as rising inflation driven by higher energy prices prompted a shift towards tighter monetary policy. The decision, announced on Wednesday following a two-day meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee, takes the prime lending rate to 10.25%. Central Bank Governor Epson Wangutha said the committee had weighed subdued domestic economic conditions against the need to contain inflationary risk and protect the currency peg, balancing subdued domestic economic activity and sluggish credit extension against the imperative to maintain the currency peg and mitigate second-round effects of the energy shock. A moderate tightening of monetary policy was deemed appropriate, Wangutha said. Inflation accelerated from 2.1% in March 2026 to 4.1% in May 2026, driven largely by higher transport costs linked to rising global oil prices. The bank revised its inflation forecast upward, projecting prices to average 4% in 2026, at 0.3 percentage points above its previous estimate, before easing to 3.6% in 2027. The MPC noted that inflation had risen significantly across most monitored economies, with the South African Reserve Bank, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan all tightening policy at their most recent meetings. That concludes our economic news. Let's take a look at the financial indicators. The Namibian dollar trades against the British pound at 21.74, against the euro at 18.80, against the US dollar at 16.19. 2 Namibian dollars and 40 cents gets you 1 Chinese yuan. On the commodities market, gold and Brent crude oil went up, while copper and platinum went down. Brent crude oil trading at 1.17%, going for $81 and 46 cents per barrel. In international news, Equatorial Guinea's government has resigned after failing to meet its objectives. Vice President Teodoro Nguema Obiang Mangwe said. Obiang, who is also the son of President Teodoro Obiang Nguema Basogo, said the Prime Minister had presented the resignation of all members of the government because it had barely reached 10% of its targets. He did not specify the targets, but a statement by the ruling party said the president had observed the government fostered corruption and failed to diversify the economy. President Obiang is the world's longest-serving leader who has ruled the oil-rich West African country since 1979 with a strong grip, while naming family members to key government roles. The president appointed the outgoing government in 2024 with Manuel Ossa Nuswa as Prime Minister. On Tuesday, the Vice President said the resignation was in line with the principle that responsibility in public management must be accompanied by results. The degree of execution achieved is clearly insufficient in relation to the expectations and commitments undertaken. We now take a look at the weather predictions before we return with the sports news. The capital city can expect a minimum of 1 degree Celsius and a maximum of 13 degrees Celsius with sunny weather conditions, while Omaheke, rather Hobabis, can expect a minimum of 10 degrees Celsius and a maximum of 22 degrees Celsius with partly cloudy conditions. Henties Bay can expect a minimum of 12 and a maximum of 16, while Walvis Bay can expect a minimum of 11 and a maximum of 16 degrees Celsius with sunny weather conditions. Here is Ari Hohat with the sports news.
Good day, everyone. Time for international sports news. And starting off with soccer news first, it's from the World Cup soccer tournament being played in America, Mexico, and Canada. And big results for some of the stronger teams in the competition. It was Argentina that beat Algeria convincing by 3-0. And it was the Lionel Messi show. And Lionel Messi scored 3 goals. He scored in the 17th minute, the 60th minute, and also in the 76th minute for Argentina to win that game. Also good result for France, beating Senegal by 3-1. And then it was Norway that also got the World Cup off to a winning start, beating Iraq by 4-1, with Erling Haaland, the Manchester City player, scoring 2 goals in the 29th minute and the 43rd minute of that game. Another result was Iran and New Zealand that played to a 2-2 draw. Continuing international sports news with rugby news, it is the Springbok men's team, the Springboks, that play again on Saturday, their first game of the season, and they play in Gebata. That game will be against the Barbarian team, invitational team, and it is Coach Rassie Erasmus that had a few surprises, and the biggest one was at fly-off, where Koen Horn of the Lions will play fly-off. He normally plays fullback for the Lions. Also, it is a South African A team that will play against Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe playing in the 2027 World Cup, so good preparation for them leading up to the World Cup. And also there, the selectors selected a few under-20 Springbok players, and 2 of them, Marcus Miller. He's from the Cape Town, the Stormers team. Also another Stormers player is Yakim Ahmed that will play fly-off, and Marcus Miller will play centre in that game against Zimbabwe. Closing off today's international sports news with cricket news, and it is the World Cup for women taking place at the moment, T20 World Cup cricket, and a result is Sri Lanka that beat New Zealand by 5 wickets. It was New Zealand that batted first, 150 for the loss of 6 wickets, and then Sri Lanka scoring 153 for the loss of 5. That is in 19.4 overs. Also convincing win for England. They beat Ireland by 4 wickets, convincing in that they did that in 17.3 overs. Lots of overs still left in that game. And it was Ireland that scored 118 for the loss of 9 in their allotted 20 overs. And then England 119 for the loss of 6 wickets to win that game by 4 wickets. So that's international sports news for today. Hope you have a great sport day. We'll talk international sport again tomorrow. Goodbye.
And with that, we've come to the end of the broadcast. Thank you for tuning in and catching up on the latest news with Sunset News. From me, Glenora Shipura, until next time.